What's up there, YouTube? Welcome or welcome back to my channel. Hope you had a great holiday week and hope you are ready to get into some creative time, sewing, knitting, crocheting, whatever you want to do. Today I am going to be sewing, and today I want to chat about something I watched recently, and I thought it was a really great documentary on Netflix about Eddie Murphy. So I'm going to start my timer. 30 minutes of creative and sewing time. So I'm still working on Simplicity 9287. It's coming along. I did a little bit of work off screen. I added my darts to the back panels and I interfaced the facing so that I could be ready to go for today and move forward. Okay, and we're done with the darts. So today we're going to be working on the little ties that go on the front, sewing those together and sewing the facing to the front panels. So these dot ties, I folded them along the fold line and just going to sew these up. So anyway, this documentary on Netflix, when I saw it was coming out, I was very excited because it was all about Eddie Murphy and his, I guess, a documentary about him and his career and everything. And he was on another documentary on Apple TV. I think it's called First Name on the Call Sheet, which was about like A-line Black actors and actresses that have made it to, prominent positions in Hollywood in terms of being movie stars or go-to people that get a lot of work. And so, of course, Eddie Murphy was up there. It was Eddie Murphy, Will Smith, Jamie Foxx, other actors, Denzel, that have become successful. And when he was up there, he told some pretty funny stories. And he seemed really relaxed and natural, but just effortlessly funny. And I was like, I love Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy is a comedic legend. He's super funny. And in my opinion, he's the funniest person, the funniest celebrity or, entertainer that is alive today. There might be other people that are not entertainers that are funny, but Eddie Murphy is the funniest entertainer alive today. It's just no question. He's just effortlessly funny. He can just do something with his eyes and it's just hilarious. So I was like, that would be great to hear more about his journey and, his rise to fame. So let's backstitch here. So the documentary does get into like his beginnings, starting as a young person who was obsessed with becoming famous. He was telling everybody that he was going to be famous by the time he hit 18. He grew up in New York, Brooklyn area, Long Island somewhere. And so he talked a little bit about his family, his father who passed away at a young age, his stepfather who he credits for, developing him into the man he is today, his brother, Well, there's two brothers. Charlie, who many people might know because he was also an actor and a comedian, I think, and he was on the Dave Chappelle show. But his half brother was his stepfather, who was also part of his entourage. And so that was nice hearing about his upbringing and everything like that, and how he wanted to be famous. And so, let me clip this down. Yeah, trim seam allowances. So he started doing stand-up and got the attention of Saturday Night Live people, and was able to get casted on that show. And I think he said he was part of a cast that was kind of new, like completely new from previous seasons. And so he kind of had to win audiences back from that. So that's how he got it started. And he talks about his early movies like Beverly Hills Cop, 48 Hours, Trading Places. And they get into his first special, Delirious. I think it was Delirious. And his red leather suit, and how, that they kept talking about the red leather suit, how amazing it was, and comedians aren't usually good looking, but Eddie was different. I wasn't alive during that time. I've never seen that special, but I mean, it was an interesting suit. I guess that's what they did in the 80s, was wear leather suits during comedy shows. I also thought it was interesting, like some of the clips they had with him on interviews, talking about some of his movies. One interviewer, I guess early on, was asking him about, his newfound fame and how he was adjusting and what did he do with his, first big checks. And Eddie, he paused. He was like, and he said something like in a vernacular of like kind of a subservient black person of old or something like that. Like, oh, something like that. Because it is kind of a ridiculous question that I don't think I've seen a white person being asked. Like a white person that just became famous, an athlete, an entertainer, someone being asked, "Oh, you're famous now. Like, what are you gonna do with your first big check?" I haven't seen it. Maybe maybe I'm missing it. But it is kind of a ridiculous question. Like, why is that a question you want to ask a rising comedy star? So I thought his answer was funny. And then there was another interviewer where they asked about the movie Boomerang, which is about like an advertising agency and this guy who's a player, but he gets played. They were like, "It's an interesting movie. It seems a little unrealistic. Like, there are no we're the white people. It's just it's just mostly black people there in a business setting." And Eddie was like, "Well, that's interesting you say that, because when you have a movie like Boys in the Hood, which touches on the violence in inner city communities, no one's asking where the white people are there. So when it's business related, you're like, oh, these black people in charge." So those are some funny clips that were in the documentary. It kind of showed his mindset of, some of these people are ridiculous in Hollywood. But yeah, they also touched on a little bit of the Richard Pryor comparison with him, and I can see, based on the movies available, like it does seem like prior to like the 90s, there was only like one main black star in the movies anyway. And that was like Richard Pryor, before him like Sidney Poitier and Bill Cosby. And they showed a clip of someone asking Richard Pryor what they think of the Eddie Murphy comparison, and he said that he didn't like it. And, in today's time, we're like, yeah, why are you comparing me to another person? Like, I'm my own person. They are their own person. But back in the day, I guess it was different. So that was interesting just to get his perspective on early times becoming famous and being compared to Richard Pryor. And, turned out he worked with Richard Pryor on Harlem Nights, which is hilarious. And I always say, I've seen Beverly Hills Cop. I recently watched Trading Places just because Eddie Murphy is now a friend of mine, but I like his movies when they started being majority black casted personally. So Harlem Nights, um, Coming to America, of course, Boomerang, those type of movies are more uh, my interest. But anyway, they go into some of his other movies and things like that, and then they talk about how they made a joke about him on Saturday Night Live, and he didn't like that. And you're supposed to be, you can't talk about your own. And so he decided he was done with Saturday Night Live until he came back, and a few years ago he hosted it, and it was like a big deal. And that was a funny episode, but they spent a lot of time on that particular time. So I don't know how big of a deal it was. I mean, maybe it was talked about in the community of how Eddie Murphy was boycotting SNL for so long, and then he finally came back. Um, anyway, some of the other highlights of that movie were seeing his house. It's like, it looks like a kind of European style house, or like a villa house where the architecture looks very European, and then he has a retractable roof. The roof opens to the sky, like the roof of the house. I'm like, wow, that's rich. That is very rich. I don't know anybody with retractable roofs, but hey, he's got the money to do it. So that was really, I mean, I've never seen a house like that. But he said he got the idea because he rented Cher's house before, and Cher had a retractable roof, so it's not like the first retractable roof available. Just reinforce at this point, apparently. Instructions. Oops. Another aspect was him talking about kind of how he was able to stay out of a lot of the trouble in Hollywood. He did not drink or do any drugs, even though he hung out with the likes of people like Rick James. But he said he would leave before things got too crazy. So apparently he lives a pretty clean and sober life, which I don't know, might be a surprise to some, given the history of what they do in Hollywood. But that seemed to have preserved him because he does look great. I think he's 60 something, 64. He's looking good for, being a part of the 80s Hollywood scene. And then he talks about how he loves himself. And I think that was kind of an important message too. Like, that could be taken by anyone to say, when you love yourself, you do things differently. You don't just go with with the popular things or with the crowd just because if something's going to harm you individually, you're not going to do it because you love yourself. So that was probably a part of the why he, lives a clean life, is he loves himself. And I think we can all take something from that. To love ourselves better, take care of ourselves, do things that are good for us, and not just because they're of the time or any peer pressure or anything like that. So that was good. He also talked about why he stopped kind of doing stand-up. And that was because when you do stand-up, sometimes you kind of workshop your jokes, as in you workshop your jokes. So you go out to comedy clubs and you're doing different jokes. Okay, now we're connecting the tie to the front of the shirt. So this is that armhole on the outside, pin tied to side. So it goes like this. Matching notches. Matching notches. It says to baste raw edges together. And tie to side. Baste raw edges together. Okay. So his jokes were getting leaked in the press, and they were critiquing his jokes before they were ready. So he was like, he didn't like that. So he kind of just stopped. And then he was saying, I don't know if I would do it again, or start stand up again. And he said if he did do it again, he would get puppets, Richard Pryor and Bill Cosby, and just play with the puppets on stage. And I thought that was a hilarious idea. Eddie Murphy with puppets on stage of Richard Pryor and Bill Cosby, and then, with Eddie Murphy being the person who does really good voices. I thought that was a hilarious idea. And then at the end of the movie, he gives you a little preview. I guess the producers of the movie got him the puppets of Bill Cosby and Richard Pryor, and so he was playing a little bit with the puppets. And that part was just funny. So I know a whole stand-up routine would be just hilarious. And then they talked a lot about his character work, how he does multiple characters in one movie. I guess the first example of that was Coming to America, which is he does, of course, the main character, Akeem, and then he does the people in the barbershop. He does the guy singing on the stage. So he's just everywhere. But he took it to another level with Nutty Professor being the Nutty Professor and Buddy Love, and then all of the Nutty Professor's family. I'm like, this guy is incredible. He's incredible. When you think about it. Oops. Don't mess up your machine. So I really enjoyed the documentary. I think it showcased his, illustrious career, his comedic genius, gave you a little bit of insight into his life, his thought processes, and things like that. So I would definitely recommend, if anybody's a fan of comedy or Eddie Murphy, to check that out. And then I started thinking about, my favorite Eddie Murphy movies. Besides the big ones, like Coming to America, of course, everybody loves that. Boomerang, everybody loves. Shrek, of course. Everybody loves Shrek. And The Nutty Professor. Some of my favorite underrated movies of Eddie Murphy include... Oh, wait. Finish Straight Edge. Wait a minute. What's part 8? Part 8 is Inset Sleeve 2. Oh, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing B. I'm doing A. Okay. So, some of my favorite Eddie Murphy movies, underrated, include Bowfinger. Bowfinger is a movie about, I guess, a famous actor that somebody wants him to do a movie. He doesn't want to do the movie, so the producer finds someone that looks just like him. I forget if he's related to him or not. E stitch, shoulder edge, or back between notch and triangle. But I just thought he was hilarious. And that, like, there's a scene where they're doing an action scene, and he has to run across a busy highway. And just that scene is just hilarious. Enough to watch it for me. So, I don't know if that's one of the movies he considers to be a flop, but I think I have that on DVD. I thought it was that funny. Another underrated movie to me is Vampire in Brooklyn, which I think was the movie they were referring to when they were making fun of him on Saturday Night Live. They said that when the movie came out, it was a flop. Nobody went and saw it, and they called him a falling star. And of course, he didn't like that. But I'm like, nowadays, like, movies are not... Sometimes they don't do well And that has even been the case, from way back in the day. I don't know if it's common knowledge, but The Wizard of Oz, the movie from 1939 with Judy Garland and, the original Wizard of Oz. Well, not the original, because there were other versions of the Wizard of Oz, apparently. But that version of the Wizard of Oz, which is kind of a big budget movie, and apparently Judy Garland wasn't popular back then either. But that's neither here nor there. The Judy Garland Wizard of Oz was not a success. It came out the same year as Gone with the Wind, which that year was, it won Oscars, all the Oscars. It was the most popular movie, I think the most successful movie up to that time. And The Wizard of Oz was not, it was a flop. And I feel like that's hard to believe these days because when I was growing up, we watched The Wizard of Oz a lot. Maybe it was on TV a lot, but we knew all the songs, we knew all the scenes, all the characters. That was one of our, well, I'm not going to say our, I have two brothers. Maybe they didn't like it as much as I did, but I like that movie. And it became more of a success after the fact, like when TV became, like cable became a thing and you were running these movies on cable and, for people to watch. So sometimes movies, all that to say, sometimes movies are not initially a success, but that doesn't mean they're not good movies or that people don't like them. You know what I mean? So I guess Eddie was upset about being made fun of on Saturday Night Live because of Vampire in Brooklyn, and he boycotted them. But I thought Vampire in Brooklyn was a funny movie. And actually, the funniest person on that movie to me was Kadeem Hardison. Harrison? The guy who played Dwayne Wayne on The Different World. On that show, he didn't seem that funny. But on the movie, he played like a ghoul who the vampire recruits to like do his bidding or whatever. And like throughout the movie, he's like falling apart. Maybe he starts off as a regular guy. The vampire makes him a ghoul, and then he's like falling apart throughout the movie, but he's still trying to do his job. And so I thought that was hilarious. And back to front at shoulders. So I would recommend that as a movie. If you haven't seen that Eddie Murphy movie, I think it's worth a watch. It was in the 90s, so he's still, not still, but oops. Uh-oh. Oh, here we go. Pin back to front at shoulders. Just ease stitch. Okay. Like this. And like this. Like this. I believe so. So I do not have any notches up here. Oh, here's a notch here, but that doesn't go here. I think that's how it's supposed to go because this opens in the front. Okay. Another underrated movie I thought was funny was Showtime, which is a buddy cop movie with Robert De Niro. Oh, that's 30 minutes. That went quickly. Okay. So I think I did pretty good. I put the ties on and I stitched it back together. I think I will continue and stitch the front to the back and just have that ready to go for next time. I hope you enjoyed your creative time, and let me know in the comments what your favorite Eddie Murphy movies are and if you watched the documentary and if you liked it or not. So I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.